International Women's Day, this is Democracy Now!
We are protesting for equality, for the rights of women, to show we are not inferior. We want to work, live in peace, to have the same rights as any man, because we are people. And as people, we have the same right to protest, to go on strike.
Women in Spain launch a one-day feminist strike as protests and rallies are held around the world, calling for gender equality, the end of sexual violence, and better working conditions. It's the first International Women's Day since the Me Too movement galvanized women around the world. We'll go to Madrid. Then we'll speak with award-winning playwright Eve Ensler about the 20th anniversary of V-Day to end violence against women and girls, as well as her play In the Body of the World.
The sun's just beginning to come out. The women are there, and they are strong. I have made a promise.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Today is International Women's Day, and across Spain, women are on strike. Here we are, the feminists, they're chanting, banging pots and pans and refusing to work for 24 hours. Organizers say it's the first nationwide women's strike in Spain's history. Their motto, if we stop, the world stops. This is Concha Gonzalez, a psychoanalyst who's not practicing today because she's on strike.
It scares society and also many women when they realize how strong we can be, especially when we are together. That's why I will strike, and that is why I am here.
The historic women's strike in Spain comes as women across the world, from Afghanistan to Philippines to Mexico, are marking International Women's Day, demanding equality and justice and an end to patriarchy and violence against women. We'll have more on their strikes, marches, and protests after headlines. In the United States, the confrontation between the Trump administration and California escalated Wednesday as Attorney General Jeff Sessions traveled to Sacramento and attacked California for its so-called sanctuary laws, a day after the administration sued California over its policies limiting local law enforcement cooperation with federal immigration agents.
So California absolutely, it appears to me, is using every power it has, powers it doesn't have, to frustrate federal law enforcement. So you can be sure I'm going to use every power I have to stop that.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions also attacked Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf, who issued a warning to the community ahead of ICE raids in Oakland last month. On Wednesday, California Governor Jerry Brown accused the Trump administration of declaring war on California and called Attorney General Jeff Sessions a liar.
And like so many in the Trump administration, this Attorney General has no regard for the truth. What he said earlier today is not true. It is a lie. But what can I say? We've seen in the Trump administration, with the investigations going on, the pleas of guilty to lying by countless individuals, colleagues. So there it is.
In Washington, D.C., at least 8 students were arrested at a sit-in at Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's office Wednesday, demanding federal lawmakers pass gun control measures in the wake of the mass school shooting in Parkland, Florida, that left 17 people dead, 14 students and 3 faculty. Lawmakers in Washington have so far failed to pass any gun control measures since the mass shooting. The Florida legislature has passed a package of moderate gun control measures in the wake of the Valentine's Day massacre at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. The measures raise the age for purchasing firearms statewide from 18 to 21, ban the purchase and possession of bump stocks, and impose a 3-day waiting period to buy guns. But the measures do not include a ban on the sale of assault rifles or limits on high-capacity magazines, as the survivors of the school shooting had demanded. The measures also allow local school districts to arm certain school workers, including teachers. The legislation now heads to Florida Governor Rick Scott's desk. On Wednesday, the confessed Parkland shooter, 19-year-old former student Nicholas Cruz, was arraigned on 17 counts of murder. And there was another school shooting Wednesday in Birmingham, Alabama. One student was killed and another is in critical condition. Authorities say the shooting appeared to be an accident. The New York Times reports last week President Trump's personal lawyer secretly obtained a temporary restraining order to silence adult film star Stormy Daniels from speaking out about her alleged affair with Donald Trump in 2006 and 2007. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders claimed Wednesday Trump won the arbitration proceeding aimed at silencing Daniels.
Look, the president has addressed these directly and made very well clear that none of these allegations are true. This case has already been won in arbitration, and anything beyond that, I would refer you to the president's outside counsel.
When did the president address specifically the cash payment that was made in October of 2016?
The president has denied the allegations against him. And again, this case has already been won in arbitration. Anything beyond that, I would refer you to outside counsel.
Stormy Daniels' lawyer disputes this claim, saying Trump himself never signed the non-disclosure agreement, making it null and void. Throughout this agreement, drafted by Trump's lawyer, Trump is allegedly referred to by the pseudonym David Dennison. Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, says he paid $130,000 of his own personal money to Daniels to keep her quiet. The payment was less than 2 weeks before the 2016 presidential election, and it could amount to a violation of federal election law. French President Emmanuel Macron has blasted President Trump for his controversial decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and move the U.S. embassy there.
When he announced unilaterally the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, I think it didn't help with resolving the conflict and the situation. I don't even think it helped with the situation in terms of security.
Control of Jerusalem is one of the most contentious issues between Israelis and Palestinians. This comes as Guatemala has announced it will also move its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in May, 2 days after the U.S. moves its embassy. Guatemalan President Jimmy Morales made the announcement after a visit by U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley to Guatemala. White House trade advisor Peter Navarro now says the Trump administration will initially exclude Mexico and Canada from Trump's new steel and aluminum tariffs, as long as the two countries sign a new version of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. This is a reversal from Sunday, when Navarro said there would be no exceptions. The announcement comes as President Trump's son-in-law and senior White House advisor Jared Kushner traveled to Mexico to meet with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto. Meanwhile, Trump's proposed steel and aluminum tariffs are causing major tensions with another key U.S. ally, South Korea, which is a major exporter of steel to the United States. The tariffs threaten to further deteriorate the relationship between the U.S. and South Korea at a time of increased nuclear threat on the Korean peninsula. And in more trade news, officials from 11 nations have gathered in Santiago, Chile, where they're slated to sign the sweeping trade agreement formerly known as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP. President Trump pulled the U.S. out of the sweeping trade deal shortly after taking office, after years of global public resistance by those who say free trade deals benefit corporations at the expense of health and environmental regulations. But the rest of the nations involved in the pact have gone forward with a deal now called the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, which will represent about a seventh of the world's economy. In San Francisco, an appeals court has ruled that a group of young people suing the Trump administration over climate change can take their lawsuit to trial. The 21 youth are arguing the government has failed to take necessary action to curtail fossil fuel emissions, violating their constitutional rights. They first launched their lawsuit under the Obama administration. To see our interviews with the group, you can go to democracynow.org. In Pennsylvania, regulators have ordered an emergency shutdown of a major gas pipeline Wednesday after massive sinkholes began opening up around the pipeline in suburban Philadelphia, forcing some residents to evacuate. The state's Public Utility Commission ordered the temporary shutdown of Sunoco Pipeline's Mariner East 1 system, warning its continued operation and the construction of the adjoining Mariner East 2 pipeline could have catastrophic results. Sunoco is a subsidiary of the pipeline giant Energy Transfer Partners, which is also the owner of the controversial Dakota Access Pipeline. In Asheville, North Carolina, a police officer has resigned, and the city's police chief has offered to step down amidst mounting outrage over the release of body camera video showing a white police officer beating and tasering an African-American man who was stopped for jaywalking. The video from August 25th shows police officer Chris Hickman choking, beating, and tasering Johnny Jermaine Rush, who repeatedly says, "I can't breathe." And the Vatican has announced Salvadoran Archbishop Oscar Romero will become a saint. Archbishop Romero was a champion for the poor and oppressed who was murdered by a right-wing death squad in 1980 at the beginning of the brutal U.S.-backed dirty war in El Salvador. Only weeks before his assassination, Romero wrote a letter to U.S. President Jimmy Carter calling on him not to provide military aid to the right-wing Salvadoran military government. Then, in the Archbishop's final and now infamous sermon, he made a direct appeal to Salvadoran soldiers to lay down their weapons.
In his name and in the name of our tormented people who have suffered so much and whose laments cry out to heaven, I implore you, I beg you, I order you, stop the repression.
Only moments later, gunmen entered the church where Archbishop Romero was giving Mass and assassinated him. Nearly 40 years later, Salvadoran Archbishop Oscar Romero will now be made a saint. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. From Afghanistan to the Philippines to Mexico to Spain, women across the globe are taking to the streets today to mark International Women's Day. In Spain, women have launched the first nationwide feminist strike in Spain's history. Aquí estamos las feministas. Aquí estamos las feministas. Aquí estamos las feministas. Here we are, the feminists, they're chanting, banging pots and pans and refusing to work for 24 hours. Organizers say its supporters include Ada Colau, the mayor of Barcelona, and Manuela Carmena, the mayor of Madrid. Organizers published a manifesto reading, quote, "Today we call for a society free of sexist oppression, exploitation, and violence. We call for rebellion and a struggle against the alliance of the patriarchy and capitalism that wants us to be obedient, submissive, and quiet. We do not accept worse working conditions, not being paid less than men for the same work. That is why we're calling a work strike," the manifesto said. Speaking in Madrid, 21-year-old Eva Gutierrez explained why she joined the strike.
We are protesting for equality, for the rights of women, to show we are not inferior. We want to work, live in peace, to have the same rights as any man, because we are people. And as people, we have the same right to protest, to go on strike. We cannot be demeaned, and we must not be afraid to go out, say what we feel and what has happened to us in our lives, what we have had to suffer just because we were born as women.
In South Korea, International Women's Day rallies were held in Seoul as the Me Too movement sweeps the country. Earlier this week, a leading South Korean politician who is seen as a possible presidential candidate, An Hee-jung, resigned his post as a provincial governor after his secretary said he raped her multiple times. Organizers of today's rally in Seoul said the Me Too movement's inspiring more women to speak out.
Last year, although we did not ignore this issue of sexual discrimination, it was not widely mentioned. But the change this year is that people are more vocal. Though some still do not dare to speak out, we should try to encourage people to speak out and take actions to make practical changes in our society. This is very different from what we encountered last year.
In other International Women's Day actions, Filipino women have rallied in Manila to protest the policies of the Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte. Afghan women held a rare public rally in Kabul. In Kenya, African women are meeting today to discuss ending violence against women and girls with disabilities. Meanwhile, in England, women organized a major march Saturday to mark the 100th anniversary of women getting the vote. Speakers included Helen Pankhurst of CARE International, the granddaughter of suffragette Emmeline Pankhurst.
This opportunity is to say how far have we got over 100 years. And actually, surprisingly, the issues that they were campaigning on, that my grandmother and great-grandmother were campaigning on 100 years ago, they're still so similar today. You know, that getting the vote didn't resolve everything. So it's up to this generation now to do as much as they can. That's why we're out here.
Here in the United States, rallies are scheduled to take place across the country. But we go now to Madrid, Spain, where we're joined by Maria Carrion, independent freelance journalist. Maria, can you describe this first ever feminist march across Spain that has just taken place?
Oh, hi, Amy, and thank you so much. It's great to be with you. Well, you know, organizers of this strike were declaring victory even before midnight rolled around here in Spain, just because this announcement of a first feminist strike ever has thrown the debate into the forefront of the media, politicians. Everyone's been forced to react to this and to talk about this enormous inequality that exists here in Spain between men and women. At midnight, as we saw in the images, women came out banging pots and pans, and that's how the strike began. Newsrooms are empty here today. Actually, you know, some talk shows went dark, talk shows that had women leading them, and you only hear women's voices on the radio if they're being interviewed. For the most part, women have walked out of their jobs if they possibly can. They're out in the streets, and what's really extraordinary is the amount of very young women that you see on the street claiming their rights. This is a very young movement, and it's a very hopeful movement. Women who have not been able to go on strike, especially those who are caring, because this is not just a strike where people are going, leaving their workplace, but also they are stopping the caregiving if they can and asking the men to replace them. The idea is for Spaniards to understand how critical women's work is and what happens when women don't show up at work. And women who cannot leave their caregiving duties are hanging aprons on their balconies to show support. You see the streets are full everywhere. In Spain, just in Madrid, there's over 100 rallies, marches, gatherings. And as you mentioned, our two women mayors of the largest cities of Spain, Ada Colau and Manuela Carmena, have both also walked out of their jobs. So they are also on strike. There's an 82% public support of this strike. So people understand the reasons why women are going on strike this year. You know, our wage gap is at around 22%. Women doing exactly the same work as men are earning 22% less on average. And also heavily underrepresented in top positions in companies and the government and the public sector.
As part of today's strike in Spain, hundreds of women took part in a bike protest in Madrid. This is Noemi Sanchez, an engineer in Spain.
We are here to claim our rights and to make visible all the inequalities of our role in society, which apparently doesn't count that much. We are here to make the problems visible and to give strength. This is an historic moment, and we are here to support it. What we are lacking is for the whole of society to start really realizing that there is a part of the population which has more privileges than the other. When people, from young children to adults, get to understand this, then it would be evident we don't really have the same privileges and opportunities.
So, Maria, can you describe how this movement and the Me Too movement around the world, is it affecting the politics of Spain? We just heard in South Korea, one of possible presidential candidates had to resign after his secretary accused him of repeatedly raping her. In the United States, right now, President Trump is engulfed in yet another scandal around sexual harassment, and in this case, being involved with or denying being involved with an adult film star and her fighting being silenced?
Well, in terms of government policy and effects on government leadership, unfortunately, all that we've had here so far in the central government of Spain has been a pushback. The governing party, the PP, is not supportive of this feminist strike. In fact, this Health, Social Services and Equality Minister went so far as to say that this strike is like a declaration of a war between sexes. We've heard also from the Catholic Church mixed views, but the Bishop of San Sebastián said the devil has gotten into feminists. And in general, there's been no support practically for this mobilization on the part of the government. However, I think that they are being forced into a corner. They've had to walk back some of the declarations that they had initially made when they've seen the massive response of Spanish society with this strike. And we are hoping in Spain for a change. However, we are not expecting it from the PP. The PP has been very regressive when it comes to women's rights. We are seeing change on local level. We are seeing, and the fact that also the PP does not have a majority rule means that it can't pass regressive laws in Spain because it doesn't have the support. But at the same time, for real significant change, political change to happen in Spain, we're going to have to change governments. So we'll see. There's a few years left for the elections, general elections. We've seen a Me Too movement in Spain, in film and the media. However, male aggressors have yet to fall. We have not seen the Harvey Weinstein effect happen in Spain quite so much yet. I think that's still to come. But this is an unusual period where you have two women, heads of two major cities in Spain, in Madrid and Barcelona, both expressing support for these rallies, being part of them. Is that right? That's right, and they and all of their female staff have gone on strike. So there are no women in the Spanish city halls right now in Barcelona and in Madrid. And they are very significant women and leaders in this country because these are the two largest cities. And this is what I'm referring to, that locally we can expect to see continued policies of change in terms of equality. But on the national level, we still see the PP being extremely reluctant to, for instance, put money behind laws, because we have equality laws. There's just not enough resources to investigate and to prosecute cases of inequality. And that's where the change has to come, really. Maria Carrion, we want to thank you very much for being with us, independent journalist and filmmaker and former Democracy Now! Producer, speaking to us from Madrid, Spain. When we come back, we'll be joined by the head of the International Women's Strike here in the United States, Tithi Bhattacharya. Stay with us.
Malian singer Fatoumata Diawara singing Boloko, a song that denounces female genital mutilation. This is Democracy Now! I'm Mimi Goodman. From Afghanistan to Philippines to Spain, women across the globe are taking to the streets today to mark International Women's Day. Protests are also taking part across the United States. We're joined now by Tithi Bhattacharya, an associate professor of South Asian history at Purdue University in Indiana. She's one of the national organizers of today's International Women's Strike here in the U.S. Welcome to Democracy Now! It's great to have you back. We spoke to you last International Women's Day. What is the International Women's Strike in the United States, and how did it begin?
So thank you, Amy. It's good to be back here, and it's nice to be able to evaluate what has happened since last year. So contrary to popular imagination, International Women's Day actually began in the United States. So it was in 1909 that the feminist Socialist Party member Teresa Mulkile, she proposed a day of International Working Women's Day for March for the United States, and she was inspired by a spate of strikes by women in New York City in the garment industry, and a lot of them very young and immigrant women. So Teresa Mulkile, Socialist Party member, proposed the International Women's Day in 1909, and then it was taken up by communists, Clara Zetkin and Louis Zietz, at the Communist International in Copenhagen in 1910, and declared as the International Working Women's Day. So, just like May Day, as a labor struggle, it began in America, but then over the years, because of various anti-labor and anti-socialist politics, and then the Cold War in America, it really died out. I mean, International Women's Day has been celebrated in radical circles outside of the United States always, but in the United States, it was always marked by sort of Hallmark cards and, flowers and things like that. That core radical labor working women's element was sort of drained out of it in the United States.
And how did the International Women's Strike form that you're one of the organizers for?
So the International Women's Strike was formed in the fall of 2016 by international feminists across the globe, inspired by Polish women and Argentinian women who were basically in Poland striking and huge, massive rallies against the abortion ban, and in Argentina, women protesting against the femicide and killing of girl children. And these were such massive demonstrations that for the first time, I think feminists across the globe managed to have a conversation about violence against women and how violence against women operate not just upon women's bodies, but also structurally and institutionally. And it was an amazing coalition that was formed in the fall of 2016 to take off as an International Women's Strike Coalition in March of 2017.
Now, Tithi, interestingly, you just came from West Virginia,
I did.
Where this major labor victory just took place. The West Virginia teachers have won. They almost ended their strike last week, but they decided to continue when the legislature did not comply with their demands. Talk about that strike in terms of women.
So, like various parts of the country, 75% of the teachers in West Virginia are women. And because of this large number of women in the profession itself has become gendered in many, many ways. So, for instance, in a lot of the schools, West Virginia, as you know, is one of the poorest states in the nation. So, for a vast majority of children going to public school, the school hot meal is perhaps one of the only hot meals they receive during the day. So, teachers have to be more than public educators. They have to make sure that the children are fed. And in a derogatory way, this is seen as care work and women's work. So, that is a sort of sexist interpretation interpretation of it. But the core strength of it lies in the fact that because it is vast majority women, and because women play a very significant role bridging the gap between the workplace, the home, and the community, that when the teachers went on strike, a vast portion of the community was immediately galvanized in support of the teachers. So churches came out, community members came out, because women are not just teachers, they were mothers, they were church members, they were breadwinners in their family. So they sort of formed this astonishing a bridge between the workplace and the home, making visible both kinds of labor.
You know, it's interesting, you had the teachers packing backpacks of food for the kids because they get both breakfast and lunch at school. And the famous nickel-and-dimed author, Barbara Ehrenreich, tweets, "This is our dystopian welfare state, severely underpaid teachers trying to keep poverty-stricken kids alive."
Absolutely.
I wanted to turn to the pair of teachers we spoke to yesterday, one from West Virginia and another from Oklahoma, where teachers are gearing up for a potential statewide strike. These are the states, I think, West Virginia is 48th in pay of the 50 states of the United States, and Oklahoma is at the bottom, 50. This is Teresa Danks from Oklahoma.
I'm still looking at other efforts to raise money to help teachers not have to pay out of pocket, because on top of our low salaries, our high insurance, and all the other problems that are happening in the classroom, teachers are paying out of pocket for everything. And we need our classrooms funded properly so that teachers don't have to do that.
Finally, what words of wisdom do you have for Teresa Danks, or experience from this, one of the longest wildcat strikes in West Virginia history?
Teresa, I can tell you that everything that you are saying, we have been saying the same thing. It feels so familiar to me to hear the situation that you are in Oklahoma. And one of the things that we have made it very clear about here in West Virginia is that, yes, we were striking for us, but we wanted to inspire teachers all across the nation. The last chant that we had, the first one, as soon as we found out that we won, was "We are worthy." And what I would tell Oklahoma teachers and educators is that you are worthy, and you need to, like she was talking about, step out in courage.
So those are the teachers from West Virginia and Oklahoma. Tithi Bhattacharya.
So this is just an amazing, and I don't want to go out forward and call it a strike wave, but it feels like that. And it is one of the things that makes it so amazing is that they, as you said, they defied the legislature, but they also defied their union. So the union came out and asked them to accept a deal from the legislature, and the teachers unanimously said no. And so that was a very, very defiant act by, and in
Oklahoma, the teachers wanted to go out on strike, have an action on April 2nd. The union said April 23rd. The teachers thought they were missing the momentum of everything that was happening, and so the unions pushed it back to April 2nd.
Correct. So the problem here is that the gendering of the strike is not being understood sometimes by national media. And I think we have to be very clear that this is, it's not just numerical that women are in large numbers in these strikes. It is also the fact that the governor of West Virginia recognizes as such and called all the strikers dumb bunnies. And so the women decided to wear little bunny hats in order to prove that they were really not very dumb bunnies.
Now, International Women's Day has become increasingly popular, is being embraced by companies as well, like McDonald's, which is flipping its iconic M to become a W. This is coming from a company that has a history of dealing with allegations of sexual harassment and fighting against paying a living wage. Do you consider this a victory when corporations come on board, or a co-opting?
Absolute co-opting. And this is where I think the International Women's Strike, we tried to propose a very clear argument about feminism for the 99%, not lean-in feminism. So this is the idea of the lean-in feminism, that women's emancipation comes through more participation in capitalism, whereas the feminism for the 99%, we propose that it is capitalism that causes women's oppression and hence need to be rejected. So we do not want more CEOs in corner offices. We want to actually dismantle the system that produces CEOs.
And very significant that both the mayors of Barcelona and Madrid in Spain, both women, are supporting and participating in this protest today, this nationwide strike in Spain, where the manifesto is condemning capitalism as well.
Absolutely. And, you know, I would rather be in Spain to watch the train stop down today. But I think United States is going to be absolutely amazing today as well. But I think the question of an anti-capitalist feminism is something we have to confront right now, because feminism for decades of neoliberalism has been a feminism of the Hillary Clintons and the Sheryl Sandbergs, which is basically breaking the glass ceiling while the vast majority of women are in the basement cleaning up the glass. And so we want to be able to say that feminism, if it is going to be successful, A, has to be the real emancipation of the vast majority of women, and B, that cannot be achieved within capitalist structures.
Very quickly, as we wrap up, what are people doing across the United States today?
Oh, it is just going to be very, very amazing, because it is literally across the nation. So there's going to be marches and rallies in Philadelphia, in California, in Oakland. Berkeley graduate students are doing a work stoppage. There are rallies planned in West Lafayette, Indiana, where I teach. The Madison had their local paper had an amazing letter saying, the University of Madison,
the University of Wisconsin,
Wisconsin in Madison was celebrating March 8th by having a police chief speak on a panel, whereas actually International Women's Day should be an anti-racist day for women of color, for trans women, etc. So there is a consciousness here of feminism for the 99%, which I think is amazing. In LA, there are marches, but one of the most significant things is Stamford, Connecticut, where Hilton workers recently, all the housekeepers at Hilton organized a union. So they unionized, and most of them are immigrant workers. And we had Maria Inés Orejuela speak at our New York rally for IWS. And at Stamford, Connecticut today, all the housekeepers are coming out in support of International Women's Strike and are going to rally. And I think that's the kind of action we want to replicate over and over again across the country.
Well, Tithi Bhattacharya, thank you so much for being with us. I'm glad you were able to fly into the Nor'easter from Atlanta yesterday, where you were before West Virginia. Associate Professor of South Asian History at Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana, one of the national organizers today's International Women's Strike. When we come back, we'll be joined by the award-winning playwright, actor, activist, Eve Ensler. She has a new play. It's In the Body of the World. We'll talk about that and 20 years of V-Day. Stay with us.
Yo puedo ser tu gran amiga, incluso tu compañera de vida. Yo puedo ser tu gran aliada, la que aconseja y la que apaña. Yo puedo ser cualquiera de todas, depende de cómo tú me apodas. Pero no voy a ser la que obedece, porque mi cuerpo me pertenece. Yo decido de mi tiempo, como quiero y donde quiero. Independiente yo nací, independiente decidí. Yo no camino detrás de ti, yo camino de la para ti. Tú no me vas a humillar, tú no me vas a gritar. Tú no me vas a someter, tú no me vas a golpear, tú no me vas a denigrar, tú no me vas a obligar, tú no no me vas a silenciar, tú no me vas a callar. No sumisa ni obediente, mujer fuerte, insurgente, independiente y valiente, romper la cadena de lo indiferente, no pasiva ni oprimida, mujer linda que das vida, emancipada en autonomía, antipatriarca y alegría. A liberar, a liberar, a liberar. Yo puedo ser jefa de hogar, empleada o intelectual. Yo puedo ser protagonista de nuestra historia y la que agita la gente, la comunidad, la que despierta la vecindad, la que organiza la economía de su casa, de su familia.
Anti-Patriarcha by Anna Tijoux, here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we continue our coverage of International Women's Day, turning now to the world-renowned playwright, activist Eve Ensler. Author of the Vagina Monologues, 20 years ago, in 1998, she launched V-Day, an international movement to stop violence against women and girls. Last month, V-Day events were held across the globe on V-Day, Valentine's Day. Eve Ensler has also returned to the stage with a one-woman play called In the Body of the World.
In a wide, open field at Panziat, City of Joy in Bukavu. It's right after one of those mad Congolese downpours, and the earth is green and moist. The sun's just beginning to come out. The women are there, and they are strong. I have made a promise.
In the Body of the World is based on Eve Ensler's memoir by the same name. It's an exploration of the female body, how to talk about it, how to protect it, how to value it. She shares her deeply intimate, painful relationship with her own body and how it's changed throughout her life, from being raped to struggling with anorexia, from battling uterine cancer to reclaiming her body when dancing with women from the Democratic Republic of Congo in the City of Joy, which she helped establish. Eve Ensler, welcome back to Democracy Now!
Thank you. Good morning. Happy International Women's Day.
Oh, back at you. And I appreciate you coming in today, especially with this very rigorous schedule you have of 1 and 2 plays a day in the Body of the World. It is a true masterpiece, this play.
Thank you so much.
This 80-minute, no interruption, no intermission play, where you take us on a journey from the land of the healthy to the land of the sick, your own personal journey dealing with cancer, and then coming back and recovering in this world of the sick, but also how and so many people are trying to make it healthy.
I think one of the things I've been realizing as I do the play in New York, which has been a really very profound experience, and first of all, how traumatized everyone is right now. Do you know, I can, every night in the audience, I can feel the level of trauma in this period of Trump, trauma in this period of racism, trauma in this period. I mean, we can just go down the list. But I think what's also really been moving to me is people's understanding of the connection between what's happening to our bodies and what's happening to the earth and what's happening to women and what's happening to immigrants and what's happening to refugees, and how all of this is one story, you know, often enacted on the bodies, particularly of women, you know.
So what does this International Women's Day mean to you?
Oh, it's such an incredible day. I mean, I was listening to the show earlier, but I was thinking, today really means to me, in the play there's a character named Cindy, who, when I was very sick and I had just gotten my takedown operation where I got rid of my bag, this woman came to help me learn how to fart, right? And she was a volunteer. And I was so moved by this woman who literally was getting up every day to come and help people in this hospital, that I started to think about all the Cindys in this world, the women workers in this world who are often underpaid, unpaid, invisible, quiet, yet they do the major work of the world, whether it's healing the work world or maintaining the world or serving the world or keeping the world alive. So I think this Women's Day means to me the incredible teachers striking in West Virginia who are now spreading to Oklahoma, the farm workers, the CIW who are standing up against Wendy's and starting a fast in New York City. Immokalee workers who are fasting on March 11th to the 15th to protest Wendy's. I'm thinking of all the women who have rose, for example, on 1 Billion Rising, the domestic workers in Hong Kong and throughout the United States, the factory workers in Bangladesh. I feel this day is really about the 99%, as she was saying earlier, but also about how we honor women and the work that women do, how we elevate and respect it and value it. Because I think so often the women who are doing the work that holds the world together are invisible, unseen, unacknowledged, and unpaid for the work they're doing.
I wanted to go back to another clip from your play, In the Body of the World, where you talk about being diagnosed with cancer for the first time.
So how'd I get it? Was it tofu? I ate a lot of tofu. Was it failing at marriage? Twice. Was it worry every single day for 56 years that I wasn't good enough? Was it talking too much about vaginas? Was it lawn pesticides? Chernobyl. It traveled far. Was it my father dying slowly and never bothering to say goodbye? Was it bad reviews? Good reviews. Was it being reviewed? Was it sleeping with men who were married? Was it my good friend sleeping with my husband? Was it Tab? Oh my God, I drank so much Tab when I first got sober. Was it Shirley Temples? Do you remember those red dye #2 cherries on top of the pretend cocktail ordered for me by the handsome, charming, sophisticated, alcoholic country club father? Was it drinking water from plastic bottles? Not being breastfed? Canned chop suey? TV dinners? Turquoise popsicles? Was it that I didn't cry enough or cry too much? Was it too many boundaries? Not enough walls? Did I get this from my family? Was it already decided? Honestly, I waited too long. I have not been a good steward to my body.
Eve Ensler, In the Body of the World, a play that she is performing, a one-woman show here in New York until March 25th, right? Until March 25th. So what was it? What do you think? Take us through that journey.
I think it's all of the above, you know. I think when you get diagnosed with cancer, your first thought is, how'd I get it? What'd I do? What's my connection? And I think the answer is, who knows? I mean, I do think for myself that I know there is a deep connection between trauma and illness and trauma and cancer. And I wouldn't be surprised if in 20 years we're calling cancer trauma. I think what happens when you're traumatized is not only do you leave your body and disassociate from your body, but you stop paying attention to your body. And your immune system is weakened because of that. And as your immune system is weakened, and because you're not treating your body as a body, but often as a machine, as something that's kind of powering, you're powering through to get you to the next place, as your immune system drops, all kinds of things can begin to happen. And cancer cells are really insidious. They appear to be one of your cells, and then they move in, and then they occupy. So I think we have to look at trauma and all the ways trauma manifests, whether it's racism, whether it's sexism, whether it's poverty, whether it's direct violence, whether it's harassment, whether it's simply not being honored for the work you do. There are all forms of trauma, particularly in capitalism and neoliberalism, which is constantly demeaning people, disposing of people, and degrading people. So how do we change that and begin to see people and hold people and respect people and embrace people and turn that around?
And you certainly experienced this firsthand as you went through the medical system. I just want to go back to one more clip from In the Body of the World.
I've not seen Dr. Sean since the chemo. The cancer's been gone almost a year, and as he was one of the Mayo surgeons who saved my life, I am sure he's going to want to share in the glory. I resort to stupid overenthusiasm, and I say some dumb, impulsive things. I feel great. I do. I can tell it's gone. My CA-125 was a 4. Then I evoke my doctors in New York. They are talking about a possible cure. And he says, oh, Eve, it is way too early to be thinking about a cure. If it comes back, it will come back in your vagina. Have you considered radiation? We can radiate your vagina. Radiate my vagina. Radiate my vagina. Do you have any idea who I am? Do you have any sense of irony?
Vensler in the one-woman play In the Body of the World. I'm not sure where to go from that, but so you go from the Mayo Clinic to Sloan Kettering to NYU, New York.
No, to Beth Israel.
To Beth Israel,
yes.
Sorry.
It was really interesting. I mean, the Mayo Clinic is such an amazing place, and it's probably the closest we have to any kind of socialist medicine. I mean, most of the doctors there have capped their salaries, so they actually work collectively as a team for you. They're not competing with each other. But then I got to Sloan Kettering, which was a nightmare experience where I not only didn't feel seen or looked at, literally, but I was treated really terribly. And I eventually went to Beth Israel, where the care was quite wonderful. But I will say, one of the things you come to realize when you're sick is that the care of nurses, for example, is the thing that pretty much keeps you alive. I mean, doctors do their big work and then they disappear, and we're grateful for the work they do. But nurses are there every single minute, every single day, tending to the details, tending to the pain, tending to your annoyingness, tending to everything. And I have to say, it kind of changed my, I worship and I bow down to nurses today. I understand how fundamental they are. And it is also really funny when I was thinking about, like, the journey of vagina. I was just thinking about how, when at a certain point somebody told me they were going to radiate my vagina, there was just a no. There was just, no, you're not going to radiate my vagina. That's not going to happen. And I'm glad I made that decision, because I think sometimes when we're going through medical processes, people tell us certain things are going to happen or offer them. And I think if we listen sometimes to our instincts, sometimes we need to be talked out of our instincts, but sometimes we know not to do things, or we know not to go to this hospital, or we know not to do this. Sometimes we're really right about those things.
And how many years has it been from your diagnosis?
It's been 8 years.
Now, in the midst of this, you were very involved with the building of the City of Joy in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I was wondering if you can describe your own personal experience of illness and then dealing with these women who so deeply inspired you, who had been raped by militias, by soldiers in Congo, and how you put these two together.
Well, I had been invited to the Democratic Republic of Congo maybe 9 years ago by Dr. Denis Mukwege, a Congolese gynecologist who's an extraordinary man, who was literally
He's been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Like four times. And he had invited me there after I had interviewed him in New York to support and to see if I could somehow both offer suggestions of how to get their story out, but also to see what we could do together with V-Day. And I think when I went to the Congo, the stories, you know, I've been in many war zones and I've heard many stories of horrible rape and systematic, you know, rape used as a tactic of war. But the Congo was something else. It was kind of this emergence of colonialism, racism, sexism, and morbid capitalism kind of merged together, and, you know, on the being really enacted on the bodies of women, you know, through the fight for economic pillaging of minerals. And I think when we started to build, and Christine Schuler Descriver and I, Mama C and I, and Dr. Mukwege, we spent months really talking to women there about what they wanted. And it really came from their vision of having a place called City of Joy, which could be a sanctuary for healing and a revolutionary center where they could turn their trauma and pain to power. And I think as we were building that, and as we were trying to figure out raising funds for it and defining what the project was and working with the women, and we were deeply in the center of the kind of mess of it, because building in a war zone where there's no roads, where there's no electricity, where there's corrupt building managers, where it was pretty insane. It was that exact moment that I got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And so I somehow was going to be dying now in the middle of this huge thing that we had begun, and they were in crisis building this place. But I think it was this really amazing thing that began to happen. I had made a commitment to the women of Congo, and I was not going to die before that commitment was fulfilled. And they had kind of made this commitment to themselves that they would build this place. So I often attribute the women of Congo as saving my life, because it was really fighting for that project and really being in solidarity with them and thinking of all they had suffered and all the ways that their bodies have been desecrated by rape, whether it's fistulas where they have holes where they'll leak for the rest of their lives, or whether it's this most severe trauma, or whether it's fragments of bullets in their skulls. Or I couldn't even complain about what was going on with me, because I had been witness to, and I had been in knowledge of what had been happening with women in Congo for so many years. And it was really amazing that as I finally was in the last stages of my recovery, and in chemo I was bald and I was not looking well. I was 30 pounds lighter than now. I got back there and the women just looked at me and they were like, oh my God, you are a freak. And they were so loving. What they did is they just started to dance, and they really danced. And that was the moment where I really thought of 1 Billion Rising, because I looked at these amazing women who have been through the worst atrocities on the planet, whose bodies in many cases organs have been removed, rearranged due to the horrible rapes. And they were dancing with every strength and intensity of their being. And I thought, my God, if the women of Congo can dance like this, what if the entire world rose up and danced?
You know, as you were performing on V-Day on February 14th, and all of your friends and family were at the theater at City Center. Your dear international family and friends were here at Democracy Now! And we talked to Christine Schuler de Schrijver, who is the head of the City of Joy in the Democratic Republic of Congo, about the conflict in DRC.
The problem is really complicated because it's an economic war. You know, for coltan, that's something we have in our cell phones and in our computer. And I think, like all the countries, you know, like in all the Western countries, they don't want this war to end because they want a mess so they can continue to plunder Congo. And rape was and is still using as terror. If you look at a map and you see where rape are committed, it's all around mines, and we still have lots of guns everywhere and militias. So the goal is for people to leave, you know, their villages so multinationals can continue to plunder Congo.
That's Christine Schuler de Schrijver describing what's happening in Joseph Kabila's DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. She is the head of the City of Joy, and place that for us as we begin to end the show.
Yes, I mean, she is the head of V-Day, and she's the head of City of Joy, and things are very, very, very dangerous right now in the Congo because Kabila is not leaving. He is now killing off many dissenters. They're verging on some kind of civil war again because he will not have an election. And there are many people who do not want him there anymore because he's so corrupt. And I mean, the country is the most plentiful of resources of any country in Africa, and people are starving all around. And that is all about policies, and it's all about selling off the Congo to people outside the Congo.
And yet you have this city that is run by women.
Indeed, right in the middle of Bukavu. And, you know, it's amazing. We've now graduated 1,038 women who have returned to their communities as leaders. They are transforming their communities in so many different ways. And what's beautiful to see is that even the environment that's around City of Joy, that was once a very poor, it's still poor environment. It's actually a tent city where former soldiers' wives are living. That's been changed because what the energy of City of Joy is beginning to spread out throughout the community and lift people's spirits and take people in and make people aware that they do have power and that women can change their destinies. And it's incredible to see the women rising up. I mean, their rising is this Saturday, but to see women rising up and taking back their rights, becoming people who can do agriculture and fight for their rights in terms of self-defense and fight for leadership. And women are becoming leaders in the Congo, and I think we're going to see very big change in the next few years.
Well, Eve Ensler, I want to thank you for joining us on International Working Women's Day as you go off to work at the theater tonight. We're going to do part 2 of our discussion. We're going to post online at democracynow.org. Eve Ensler, award-winning playwright, author of The Vagina Monologues. She has a new play, In the Body of the World, till March 25th at City Center, Manhattan Theater Club. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.